The New Orleans Saints are installing a new offensive system in 2024, but is it going to be enough to get the best out of quarterback Derek Carr? We got all that and much more on today's episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. As you can tell, I am not Brian Peacock, but don't worry, I am Ross Jackson, daily host of the Locked On Saints podcast and channel manager here, covering and taking care of most of the NFL channel here on the network. So we're going to be taking a look here today, along with former NFL scout Matt Williamson, who you can follow on your favorite social media at Williamson NFL. We're breaking down the New Orleans Saints. It's my expertise, and we're bringing in Matt Williamson's expertise in it, as well as we take a look at the New Orleans Saints defense and how much that is going to be pivotal to their success in 2024. The offensive line's contributions to the team's success with that new look O-line, and of course, the new system going down in New Orleans and how it could potentially elevate or expose Derek Carr's game. We got all that and much more coming up for you on today's episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show as we bring you those elite breakdowns and in-depth analysis. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, today's show brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed over at Game Time. Terms apply. Matt, when you take a look at the New Orleans Saints, what do you feel right now? Do you feel excitement? Do you feel some optimism, or do you feel a lot of confusion and lingering question marks when it comes to the team?
Mixed feelings, because you know this better than anyone, because I think this organization looks at things differently than everybody else. And I always make the joke that it's always Mardi Gras in New Orleans. They don't care about the hangover. And what I mean by that is they're in it to win it every year. They're not going to take the step back. And the hangover is the salary cap. You know, we'll deal with it tomorrow. We'll just keep drinking when we get up in the morning, or, you know, get the beads out, whatever. It'll be fine. Push it off a year. And I think at some point that's really going to bite them. You know, I mean, it's bound to. And maybe it is this year. That being said, our first topic has me very encouraged on the Saints. And I've actually put a couple bucks down on the Saints over win total for the year, too. I think that they're a better team with an easier schedule than national people realize. But where I'm going with this is everyone knows I'm a Steeler guy. And Matt Canada in Pittsburgh was, to be kind, probably the most scrutinized offensive coordinator in the league last year. Rightfully so.
Yeah.
I don't think New Orleans was that far behind. I mean, just an offensive coordinator upgrade could have massive ripple effects to this team. I assume you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Pete Carmichael was not what the New Orleans Saints had hoped that it would be. There were rumors that he didn't even want the job at first, like didn't even want to interview for the job at first when it came to that position being open after Sean Payton moved on, that he did an offensive play caller. Yet he got 2 years of opportunity and didn't show any improvement from one year to the next until it was far too late in both of those seasons. And so now the New Orleans Saints have made an upgrade going to what I think is the right coaching tree to go after, the Shanahan Kubiak coaching tree. And by the way, when we talk about the Shanahan system, we talk just as much, Matt, isn't this true, about the Mike Shanahan system, which was made alongside Gary Kubiak, Klint Kubiak's father, as it is that we talk about Kyle Shanahan. So this is a really big upgrade for New Orleans when it comes to the offensive side. Could you see this having an impact and the positive for quarterback Derek Carr, who finished the season strong in 2023 and now is going to be looking to maybe get that momentum going a little bit quicker this year in 2024?
Absolutely. And I've always, going into his Saints career, I thought Carr was the 9th to 12th best quarterback in the league. I mean, and that's kind of a compliment. I mean, that's not Josh Allen. That's not Mahomes. I mean, I think that's an above average starter before when he left the Raiders. And I do think history shows he did his best work with really good offensive minds. John Gruden comes to mind, of course, you know, that if you coordinate things up, he is a smart, efficient, toolsy quarterback. He's not an improv guy. I think he could be much more of a risk taker. I know we'll talk Saints O-line here, but there's some questions to say the least there. But I think a Shanahan system mitigates a lot of those. You know, you look at Miami, you look at the Niners, they have a great left tackle and 4 other dudes, you know, I mean, and the system shields that a little bit. And I think Carr, if you put him in Miami, if you put him in San Francisco, could be a really good processor, get it out quick, efficient. You know, he's not going to do a lot late in the down, but I expect him to have a much better year.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned like San Francisco and the offensive line and Miami in the offensive line. The thing that I think a lot of people would point to counter that is that Brock Purdy does a lot out of structure. But you also highlighted Tua or highlighted Miami. Tua Tagovailoa doesn't do a ton outside of structure. He's not the biggest improviser. So there's the framework for how this could potentially work for a Derek Carr in a way, as well as Derek Carr is not going to be the improviser, big time play creator if a play breaks down type, but he's going to have those check down options and things like that. I think where this can fall short for New Orleans, and I think the biggest concern that a lot of Saints fans have going into the 2024 season is, can they get the system clicking early? Last year, in that Pete Carmichael system, which, as we mentioned, was not the most impressive system in the world, in fact, far from, it took them 12 games to really get it under their belt, really get their legs up under them. A system like this, is it more challenging to get your legs under it, or are there enough of the mechanics to kind of help mask a little bit of those growing pains?
It's a great question. It's a hard one to answer because I do think Carr from the neck up doesn't have issues, you know, and I do think he'll get it quickly. I mean, he's been a student of the game since well before he was, you know, with his brother and all those things too. So I have no concerns with him. It's sort of a young offense, but I would think you have plenty of time to get it going. You would think, you know, along those lines, the second half of the season is probably better than the first, unless injuries totally derail things. But
and the schedule is a lot easier in the second half too.
Is it? Okay. Okay. I didn't realize that, but I just know they have a pretty easy schedule overall. This isn't really the answer to the question, but I do wish they had one more playmaker, you know, a tight end that was a difference maker, a number 2 receiver that was a little firmer, or, you know, I don't even think Kamara's what he used to be. I'm a Kendre Miller fan, but I think they're a weapon away, certainly from the Niners and Dolphins neighborhood.
Yeah.
I still 2 weapons, right?
Yeah, I still think if I'm Mickey Loomis, I'm at least calling San Francisco to go, hey, what would it take to get Ayuk up out of San Francisco and over here to New Orleans? Like, at least make the phone call and figure things out. I'm with you on that. And I think maybe that other playmaker arises from a player that's on the roster that we're just not thinking about, right? Does Juwan Johnson carry over the late season success, finally find the early season success? We've seen him find that success weeks like 10 through 18, weeks 14 through 18, and stuff like that in the past. Can he have more of that success week 1 through 18 if he's back out on the field on time, as he's nursing an injury post-surgery right now? I did mention too on Locked On Saints not too long ago that Derek Carr could also stand to take more risks. He threw 8 interceptions last year. I wouldn't be mad if he threw 12 if that also ends up correlating to some of the bigger plays being available. So maybe those playmakers arise with a little bit more of the risk taking that could potentially be afforded in this offense.
My worry is I just don't know if it's in his DNA. You know, I mean, that's probably my biggest knock on Carr. You know, playmaker, athleticism, modern day quarterback aside, is he's too content to not drive it between, you know, in a tight window, and he'll dump it to Kamara, or, you know what I mean? And I wonder, does he worry too much about his stats, or is he just innately conservative? You know, I mean, that to me is a hard thing to unlock. And even on his best day, he was never a gunslinger.
Yeah. I guess if there's going to be a lesser of 2 evils, you'd certainly hope that a quarterback were taking more risk than less risk. And certainly the Saints have seen that with Jameis Winston in the past, now transitioned to Derek Carr. It could not be any different between those 2 quarterbacks. Coming up next, a big part of the success for the New Orleans Saints is going to be based on the offensive line that's protecting Derek Carr, but it's almost entirely brand new. Can they bring it all together early? We're going to be breaking that down as we take a look at the New Orleans Saints offense and some of the weapons around Derek Carr as we continue on with this episode of the Peacock Williamson NFL Show, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of the Peacock Williamson NFL Show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the absolute best place to go to grab all of your last-minute tickets. So if you're like me and you like planning moments in advance, it's perfect. If you're a little bit better than me, you like planning months in advance, you can also utilize everything going on over at Game Time as well. So whether you're taking a look at sports, maybe you like comedy, theater, different types of events that are going on all around your city, Game Time has an unlimited selection of things for you to check out. They do it with all-in-one pricing, which you can toggle on so you don't have to deal with any hidden fees when you get to checkout. You can also even see the view from your seat before you buy it with their seat viewing options as well. One of my favorite features of Game Time. So take all the guesswork out of buying your tickets today with the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. So you can go and check them out today at the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Matt, as we continue on here with the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, we want to take a moment to say thank you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also go and check out our friends over at the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream, specifically programmed to give you all the biggest stories from the local experts that know the teams the best, and without all the shouting, yelling, and screaming you're probably going to hear on some of those other networks. So go and check them out today. Locked On Sports Today on your favorite podcast app. You can find the 24/7 stream on YouTube, as well as on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Matt, the offensive line in New Orleans is going to be a huge question mark going into 2024, not because I think people are already looking down on it, but I think there's just a lot of unknown. You have a brand new rookie starting left tackle. We assume Tallies Fuaga is going to start there. You're going to have a new starting left guard and Trevor Penning moving from left tackle to right tackle. That's all new for him as well. So when you look at a new offense coming in, a quarterback that needs to improve going into his second year or maintain the way that he finished out his first year going into his second year is probably more appropriate, and an offense that you want to see improve in 2024, how tough is it to kind of project success with an offensive line that's 3/5 new?
Yeah, and as everyone knows, this time of year is a slow time in the NFL, and still ESPN, NFL.com, I used to do this all the time with ESPN, are putting out lists, of course. You know, it's a list
season, baby.
No doubt, no doubt. And I read every O-line list I possibly can. And pretty consensus has the Saints at the bottom of the league, and some I've even seen at 32. That might be a little rough, but I think the guards are below average, to be kind. You know, Salvadori and Ruiz. Ruiz hasn't quite lived up to ever being a first-round pick, especially for that position, if you're going to use a first-rounder there. Sure. I'm fine at center. I loved Fuaga, but for some reason, all the first-round tackles are switching sides, and I think that just complicates things. You know, even Alt. I mean, it's so weird. Latham, Alt, everybody. So I wish that wasn't the case. I wish you could just plug them in at right tackle. But the Ramczyk stuff, which I need to ask you about, really clouds that. I mean, ideally, he plays, and then the rookie learns his trade at left tackle. If you knew Ramczyk was never going to play at all, then I would just plug Fuaga in at right and not teach a young dog new tricks. Right. And as for Trevor Penning, I would be massively concerned about him. I mean, to be honest, I remember saying when he came out of school, I think his WWE career will be better than his NFL career. I mean, doesn't he seem like the Undertaker or some kind of villain? Right? He would be excellent.
He would be an excellent foil. Excellent foil. No doubt about it. Yeah, it is interesting. I think when we were sitting in that draft room that day and they selected Tallies Fuaga was 14 overall, whatever it was, we assumed, okay, that's the new starting right tackle. You mentioned Ryan Ramczyk. Ryan Ramczyk, I won't be surprised to see him start the season on the physically unable to perform list and then probably never hit the field in 2024. And then it becomes the question mark. Then it becomes the question mark. Does he play again in his career? For those that don't know, he's dealing with a degenerative knee issue, something that he's had since he was drafted, along with some back issues and things like that. But it's been a degenerative knee issue the last couple of years. If you ever want to know how to sign or how to spot kind of an aging veteran or a veteran that's dealing with some injury issues that's kind of limiting them, look for the guy that's always on rest on Wednesdays in practice. That's the dead giveaway, isn't it? And that was Ryan Ramczyk. That's been him for the past 2, maybe 3 seasons now. And now at this point, offseason knee procedure to clean some stuff up was going well. Then all of a sudden, very, very quickly wasn't going well in terms of the recovery. And Matt, as you know, the only thing worse than coming out of surgery and things not going well is them going well first and then changing course.
Yeah.
That's typically not a good sign. There's reports that he's lost a bunch of weight. So, I mean, even if he is healthy, can you even put him out there in the first place? Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of,
he might already know he's done. You know, if he's losing weight already, he might be like, I'm probably never going to see the field again, you know, which is terrible.
And, yeah, it stinks because he was such a great player for New Orleans, a really, really good dude. This is just out of his control at this point. And he played the career that he was able to play up to this point. We'll see if he's able to hit the field again. But with that in mind, it made sense to go with Tallies Fuaga and to have him ready to go at right tackle and be the next guy, and then give Trevor Penning a new opportunity, staying at left tackle, but in a new system that maybe complements his strengths a little bit more. But now they're swapping sides. Now, I will say, Matt, it remains to be seen if that is a permanent change or if that was just kind of information gathering during mini camps and OTAs. We'll see where things go when we're out with them in Irvine, California for training camp. But in any case, you're still going to have 2 young offensive tackles that need to be able to lead the way for this offensive line. And as you mentioned, still some question marks on the interior as well, which could really mess some things up for this new offensive system.
You have to be somewhat I might be more concerned with the guards than the tackles, to be honest with you. I don't know. I just like Fuaga so much, but Penning I don't, and Ramczyk I'm just not going to count on. But that's 4 question marks, though. I mean, or at least 3, and probably 2 holes is the way I see it. Even if things work out well, are you going to be average at left guard or right tackle? Probably not.
Yeah. And so this is where I think the new system might be able to cover some things up. It's a wide zone system. It's going to want people to move off the ball, move off the snap, get to the second level, get to the third level. Matt, you know just as much as anybody with your expertise in offensive line, getting confidence early on in a game can help an offensive line succeed in the fourth quarter. And so getting to a point to where your run game is punching the defense in the throat, that might help this offensive line. First of all, take some pressure a little bit off of what it has to do in the pass protection game, but then have the confidence that it needs to have to be able to stand up and then make some of those stops later on. Play action definitely helps, motion, all these other things to kind of ID what a defense is doing. But you got to start strong in order to do that. And the Saints were not very good at starting strong last year. That's going to be a big marker for improvement going into 2024.
One little nugget along those lines. We talked about all the uncertainty with the offensive line. And if you're going to install a zone-heavy scheme, continuity would be the key that I'm looking for here. Can we get the same guys out there running with the ones all through camp, getting to know each other, the timing of it all? When do I pass this block off? And, you know, with all the things we just talked about 5 minutes ago, that doesn't look set in stone, you know?
Yeah. That's a really, really good point. That's going to be a big thing to keep an eye out on all throughout training camp, especially that left guard position. That's the one that I assume you're going to see more folks getting opportunities. Ali Udo, another veteran that didn't get any opportunities during OTAs, minicamp, stuff like that. He might start shuffling in there. You've got veterans like Shane Lemieux and Lucas Patrick that could potentially plug in there. And then, of course, Nick Saldiveri coming in as that 4th-round pick in his second year. We'll see which one of those guys. But, yeah, you're right. If they can settle their core 5 early, that might end up benefiting them big time come the regular season. Outside of the offensive line, there's a pair of players that everybody's excited about. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to the fantasy community, you're talking to the NFL analysts, you're talking to New Orleans Saints fans, no matter where it is that you're discussing. Wide receivers Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed have garnered a lot of optimism. When you look at those 2 guys, before we wrap up and look at the defense here, how do you feel about what they might be able to bring to this offense for New Orleans?
Yeah, I'm a very big fan. And it just so happens Peacock brings up A.T. Perry all the time, who I think is a pretty solid
he's
prospect
a good one.
too. Yeah. I've loved Shaheed for years. Ideally, in a perfect world, I think he's your 3rd leading receiver. You know, you have a tight end gets more targets than him, or a bigger receiver, especially in this system. You know, a receiver with size would be, you know, not be frowned upon. But I don't use the term wide receiver 1 very often at all. I think there's a dozen of them on the planet. There might be 10 of them on the planet.
Yeah.
I think Olave is banging on the door to be one of them, though, and may already be, you know, and in a different system, I think we maybe last year would have said Oh yeah, that's one of the top 10 receivers on the planet right now.
Yeah, I can't wait to see these guys in this new system and how that run game could potentially complement them. The boost that you get in wide receiver production on a per route run basis from both motion and play action, all of that should be incorporated in this new offense. So I think it's going to have a lot of benefit for those guys. Coming up next, the other thing that's going to have a lot of benefit for this New Orleans Saints offense is actually its defense. It's been its identity since 2017, but are they going to be able to keep it going? Well, they absolutely have to if they want to find success in 2024. We're going to break down Dennis Allen's defense up next as we continue on with the Peacock Williamson NFL Show, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, continuing on with the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. We appreciate you, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out your favorite local Locked On show for your second listen as well. We got everything covered from the NBA to the MLB, more NFL, every local show out there, every team out there. We've got a local show covering, so make sure you go and check it out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Here with Matt Williamson, we're taking a look at the New Orleans Saints defense, who have to kind of be the standard bearers for this team. You got a defensive head coach, one of the better defenses in terms of consistency since 2017 when he rejoined the staff and really got this. He drafted Marcus Williams, drafted Marshon Lattimore, got the defense together, kind of rejuvenated defense in New Orleans. It's been a big part of their identity, Matt. And I think the thing that they do so well that separates them from other defenses is that press man system. How challenging is it to be able to execute that successfully on a week-by-week basis when we see more and more zone approaches by defenses across the league?
Yeah, and this is something Brian and I talk about a fair amount. Is well, if you're zone heavy or if you're man heavy, maybe you play 1 out of 3 snaps in pure man. It's still no one's playing 60% man, 70% man. So. Man-heavy teams are great, and I do think that is if I in a perfect world, if I was structuring a defense, I would want man-to-man corners first and foremost in the secondary, as opposed to being a zone-heavy team. And I wanted to start there with the Saints because after drafting McKinstry, I thought Lattimore might be trade bait. Like, they have a wealth of corners. It might even be it probably is the strongest position on the whole team, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
I like Taylor a lot. I like Adebo a lot. I mentioned Lattimore. So they have the guys to do it without a doubt, which maybe leads to more blitz. That was going to be my question for you is, you have so many corners. Did you make that the backbone of the defense now and blitz a little bit more? There aren't a lot of stud pass rushers.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of proposal because, look, the Saints defensive line was not the most impressive last year, either when it came to affecting the quarterback or, in the run game. And so I think that when it comes to this defense, though, what they really like to do is they don't typically over blitz. They'll blitz on selective opportunities. Third downs are really heavy blitz down for them. They love to deploy Demario Davis as a blitzer through the A gap. He does that so extremely well. Now they've added Willie Gay, though, to that second level, another guy that packs a lot of speed. So maybe they are gearing up to blitz a little bit more there. But what they also love to do is get coverage sacks. Let the corners go out there, be on an island, and then let the defensive line, because they don't have a lot of those speed rushers, they like to let that defensive line just work on second and third efforts and get to the quarterback eventually. That has worked for them in the past. It didn't work for them super well last year. I think that's one of the reasons why they went out and got Chase Young, who has a little bit more of the speed profile, still very much not he's not a Micah Parsons or anything like that. It's where you're, screaming off the edge, or a Will Anderson screaming off the edge or anything like that. But he does have the ability to affect the quarterback more quickly. And I think that ends up putting them in position to maybe be able to deploy a little bit more speed in their pass rush, whether by supplementing it with the blitz or getting 3 defensive linemen out there as Carl Granderson continues to develop. Cam Jordan tries to get back on track after a down year with injury last year, and then the addition of Chase Young. I think that they're looking at ways to maybe balance a little bit more, because I think that they've really noticed the value of having a guy like Zach Bond last year finally rush the passer. After years of trying to turn him into an off-ball corner, despite a 12.5 sack season coming out of Wisconsin when he was drafted in the 3rd round by the team, I think they finally realized the value of speed when it comes to the pass rush. And maybe that ends up being a big sort of piece of their new identity on the defensive side.
Yeah, I love that conversation. I mean, you play in a dome. Most of your games are in the South. You don't have to be – speed can work to your advantage more.
Yeah.
And really, basically going back to Sean Payton's being there, they've probably had the biggest and most physical defensive front four you could possibly have. I mean, 280-pound ends. I mean, a lot of street fighters and run stuffers. And a question for you is, I loved Brian Brisset coming out of school, and I thought he went right a little even later than I thought. Do you think him or Foskey or Peyton Turner, these guys were all drafted in the top 2 rounds, could one of them break out? I think they could really use that.
I think Brisset's going to be the one with the most opportunity to do it. Playing on the interior, having, Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard, a couple of like real veteran guys next to him. He had such a solid season last year from a bunch of different aspects, whether you look at his pass rush, like 4.5 sacks, which I know doesn't light the world on fire, but from the interior, pretty good for a rookie on the interior, and a guy that's, this is a defensive line that's heavily rotated as well. That's worth keeping in mind too. And so I think he's the one that's going to get the most opportunity, but the guy that needs it the most in terms of a breakout is Peyton Turner.
Yeah.
Contract year, right? First round pick, contract year. Matt, he's never played more than 170 defensive snaps in a season since drafted. That's pretty, that's tough, right? And look, and it's injury stuff. What can you control? What can't you control? All these other things. Like, that's always going to be the question mark. But you're right. It's disappointing. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option ahead of this year for next year. This is a true contract year for Peyton Turner. And with edge rusher Tano Passanio, who, NFL veteran, played with the Chiefs, came here to New Orleans and has performed extremely well here, playing both on the inside of the defensive line and on the exterior as well, on the edge. With him now having this Achilles tear that might have happened before offseason programs begin, we'll see if he ends up on the PUP list or the NFI list. It'll give us a little bit more of an idea of what his timeline will be in that case. It's going to open up the opportunities for a guy like Peyton Turner, who has the size to play inside and out. So I think the guy that is going to have the most opportunity to have that breakout is Brian Brisset on the interior, but the guy that needs it the most is Peyton Turner. Isaiah Foskey can take more time, right? 2nd round pick, only going into his 2nd year. Him contributing this year would be, as we say down here in the South, a little bit of lanyap for sure, but it's not necessarily a full requirement for him. He can continue to develop.
And the other thing I want to bring up with the defense is, I'm sure you guys adore the Honey Badger, Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan. Like, they could be in the Ring of Honor or whatever the Saints have, that their names could be on part of the stadium. There's no question about it. But the combined age there would concern me. I mean, and we probably said this last year and the year before. Like, we said the same thing about Cam Hayward. He's an all-time great Steeler, might not be a Hall of Famer, but if he takes that step backwards, if Jordan, Davis, or the Badger, 2 of the 3 go backwards, that would really, really concern me defensively.
Yeah, and I would say, honestly, if Demario Davis took a step backwards, it's a big issue for the New Orleans.
You think he's the most important?
I think he's, I think so. Look, so Cam, Cam right now, fantastic, phenomenal leader. He can come in and be a great run defender for you. If he can get back to the 7.5 sack level of production, that's what I would say is like best case scenario for him, and really all that anybody should be asking for. I don't think you're asking for a 10 sack season from Cam anymore, because you've got Carl Granderson.
And they'll regulate his snaps, I'm sure. He just mentioned a lot of defensive linemen, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so Carl Granderson had 8.5 sacks last year, 14 tackles for a loss. You've added Chase Young. You've got those young guys. There's enough there to continue to produce, while Cam Jordan probably sees the lowest percentage of snaps of his career in 2024. That's my expectation for him. Okay. And then look, you keep him fresh that way, right? Makes him a little bit more efficient, all that other stuff when he is on the field. Tyrann Mathieu, I think, is the lifeblood of the secondary, big time. But you've also got a really good young safety in Jordan Howden that can step in. You have good veteran safeties in terms of Will Harris and Jonathan Abram. And you've got phenomenal corners on the other side that can kind of help to keep some things down there too. So I think you have a lot that you can kind of mask with the way that this defense likes to play. Like, the play style can mask a little bit of those safety deficiencies. We've seen it before. So if he did take a step back, which I think of the ones to take a step back, he's probably the least likely to do it. But for me, Demario is the lifeblood of the defense. Yeah. And so if he ends up taking a step back, I think that it ends up having a big time ripple effect across this New Orleans Saints defense. That's one of the reasons why I think that the addition of Willie Gay, along with Pete Werner, who's going into his contract year, finishing up his rookie season, was so big for New Orleans, because they might be able to kind of help themselves with that. But I think the more you've got Demario on the field, the better off your defense is.
So Jordan Howden is a guy you guys are confident in and like? I mean, he's not no. I bet a lot of our audience don't even know who he is.
Yeah, you're right. 5th round pick last year, safety out of Minnesota, Golden Gophers. The coaching staff loves him.
Okay,
absolutely loves him. They see him as a post safety, a deep coverage guy, but they're going to give him some opportunities in the slot as well as kind of the dime guy next year, which he got some of those opportunities early last year as well. Played 55% of defensive snaps because starting safety Marcus May was not able to stay on the field, whether it be injury, suspension related, whatever it was. It's why they ended up moving on from 17 games over the last 2 seasons. They said, okay, we're good here. But they're very comfortable and confident in Jordan Howden. So I think that there's going to be a conversation of who starts next to Tyrann Mathieu. Will it be the young Howden or will it be the veteran and Jonathan Abram? I'm going to bet it's Jonathan Abram's job to lose right now, but we'll see if Jordan Howden's able to push for a little bit more playing time there for sure.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, I think that they have a lot of faith in who Jordan Howden can develop into over the course of the next, I'll call it couple of years, but we'll see if it's needed sooner.
Cool.
So I think that's big. Yeah. So that's what we look at when it comes to the New Orleans Saints defense. A lot to bring together for this New Orleans Saints team. But man, if they do bring it together, they could be one of the surprise teams in the NFC. I would certainly say that. Doesn't mean that they'll be a top team in the NFC. I'm not going to make that argument, Matt, but I will make the argument that they could be a surprise team within the league and maybe finally in that playoff drought in 2024. We will be back with you tomorrow and bringing you more of the biggest stories from around the National Football League, as well as deep dives and, of course, the fantastic analysis that you get here every single Monday through Friday here on the show on some of your favorite teams across the league. For Matt Williamson at Williamson NFL on your favorite social media, I'm Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. We'll see you again here soon on the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.